77 WABC invites you to a family fun day and softball showdown on July 20th with net proceeds benefiting Shriners Children's. John Sterling will call the game as the FDNY takes on the NYPD with special guests Dwight Gooden, Art Shamsky, 77 WABC hosts including Sid Rosenberg, Anthony Cumia, Lionel, Dominic Carter, and many more. For more info and to buy tickets, go to ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. That's ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative. On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Hey, Dick, I have a different version of that intro. Go there, Lux. What is this show, Dick?
Welcome to the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group.
Oh, God, this is unbelievable.
All right.
First of all, I just want to say I want to know more about this baseball game that they're having for the kids. Well, we'll talk about that later. All right, go, Dick.
First of all, my comments on Mamdani.
I call him. I have a very hard time saying Mamdani. It just doesn't flow out. So I call him Danny Mom.
Okay.
Danny
Well, hopefully it won't be important to learn his name.
Right.
I'm going to actually begin the show by quoting the New York Times editorial, which is something I never do. I barely read them, but this one was pretty important. This is the New York Times, the liberal bastion. Mr. Mamdani is running on an agenda uniquely unsuited to the city's challenges. He favors rent freezes that could restrict housing supply and make it harder for younger New Yorkers and new arrivals to afford housing. I mean, who's going to build housing when there's a rent freeze?
Yeah, right.
He wants the government to operate grocery stores as if customer service and retail sales were the strengths of the public sector. Can you imagine the lines outside the stores?
No.
He minimizes the importance of policing. He favors defunding the cops.
That's unbelievable.
Continue with the editorial. Most worrisome, he shows little concern about the disorder of the past decade, even though its costs have fallen hardest on the city's working class and poor residents. Many New Yorkers have a sinking feeling at some point in the past decade. They've worried that their city was headed back to the bad old days of the 70s and 80s. The days of city going broke, of the state taking over, Ford to city drop dead, are back with a vengeance if Mamdani wins.
God.
Continuing, the Times said, subway trips have a chaotic or even menacing quality. Nearly half of the bus riders board without paying their fares. The number of felony arrests has jumped by more than 40% over the past decade. The city's fourth graders, after significantly outperforming their peers in other large cities during the early 2000s, have fallen back in math and reading. Housing has become even less affordable, and homelessness has risen. The most basic measure of a city's appeal, the population, remains well below its pre-COVID peak. Great prospects for the city. I mean, nominating Mamdani in the Democratic primary is the ultimate act of self-destruction for New Yorkers and for Democrats and for liberals.
What was the percentage that he won from Como?
About 5 or 6 points.
Wow. There's that many people that...
The basic point here is that this guy is totally, completely, thoroughly out of step with the city, and he also is uniquely biased against the basically third of the city that's Jewish.
No, he's not out of step with he's in step with some weirdos in the city that voted for him. That makes no sense.
He's criticizes Israel.
Oh,
he supports the BDS movement, which is
boycott,
divest, and
sanctions.
And sanction movement about Israel. He says that October 7th was basically Israel's fault.
Hamas's thing when they went into Israel, that thing, yeah?
Incredible that this guy could be close to winning. It's only a testament to two things. Number one, how strong anti-Semitism is. And number two, how masochistic and self-involved and negative about themselves our Jewish population is.
I don't understand that. It seems like there's a magnet for the creepy people in the world to start to move to Manhattan. You know, I used to think it was beautiful people and very polite, and it's just so weird that he can win that nomination.
Now, in a major development that's reshaped the mayoral race, Andrew Cuomo confirmed that he will remain on the November ballot.
Good.
And a new poll shows him locked in a statistical tie with Democratic Socialist and Hamas sympathizer Zohran Mamdani.
Good. That's
Cuomo,
good.
who lost the Democratic primary to Mamdani earlier this week, declined to withdraw from the Fight and Deliver Independent line ahead of Friday's 5 p.m. deadline, as required by New York State election law.
Right.
His decision, confirmed by campaign sources to the New York Post, comes despite pressure from some Democratic Party figures to step aside. Cuomo, however, is moving forward, and a new poll shows him and Mamdani tied at 39 each, with Eric Adams at 13, Chris Sliwa at 7. And
Curtis Sliwa.
And another independent candidate at 2.
Well, you know, I have to say this, Dick. This is great for Curtis. You know, it's so hard for a Republican to win in New York, as we know, and you tell me all the time. But the people that are going to come out, the people in the middle, they're not going to come out for Mamdani, and I can't even say his name. They're not going to come out for him because he's crazy like the AOCs. The ones that aren't going to come out for Cuomo because of the nursing homes and the ship and the thing, all of that business, right? And Adams, they're not going to come out. Certain liberals aren't going to come out because he was going with the sanctuary city. He was buddying up with Trump, so they don't like him. Curtis has he's got a shot at this right now because a lot of people aren't coming out. That's just my feeling behind it. And Curtis, and the other thing with Curtis, he's a tough son of a bitch. This guy, listen, you ain't taking him down. The mob couldn't take him down when they tried a long time ago. The only way he's getting out of this race is in the pine box. He told me that. I thought that was kind of clever. I like him. He's going to be another Rudy. He's not Rudy, but he's going to be like that. He's going to say, listen, shut up. This is what we're going to do. He'll get all the right people in his administration. He'll get the cops funded properly. This guy is the guy to go out for this guy and vote for him.
So Doug was asking me the other day, does Curtis have a shot? And I said, well, his opponents are a person who killed 6,000 elderly people by putting them into nursing homes, putting COVID patients into nursing homes.
God, it's not
Another
funny.
opponent endorses the BDS movement, basically endorses 9/11.
He's like a terrorist.
And certainly endorses terrorism and the crazy, extreme anti-Jewish community. And the third one's a mayor who's been indicted, dropped by Trump. But I mean,
so do you think he has a shot, Curtis?
So do you think he has a shot? Yeah, I'll bet he does have a shot.
I really do, and he's tough. We need a tough guy like him. We need you on that wall. I use that for General Flynn all the time.
The only way Mamdani won this primary was because voters were turned off by Cuomo. They disliked all the sexual harassment stuff. They hated that he voluntarily put 6,000 elderly New Yorkers at risk and led them to their death by moving them from hospitals to nursing homes, even though health officials begged him not to do it. And he knew that in nursing homes, they would spread COVID and would infect the most vulnerable population in the world. And as a result, 6,000 people died. So New Yorkers did not want to support Cuomo, and they were going to support anybody but Cuomo. And when Mamdani came along and promised basically free housing, free rent, free bus fare, free child care, free college tuition, and all the other stuff, they were too infatuated and maybe too stupid to vote their own self-interest.
More like it, too stupid. Well, that's the reason why Curtis has this shot. The same reason why Cuomo lost is going to be the reason why all three of these guys are going to lose, and Curtis is going to have a great shot.
It's such a flawed
You think I like
field.
him?
It's such a flawed field to think of the alternatives being Cuomo, Adams, or Mamdani.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Who's this other guy, Jim Walden? I didn't even...
2%.
Yeah.
And social media shows that Mamdani's pattern of defending Hamas and attacking Israel, an extensive social media history of supporting Hamas and supporting the BDS movement. That's boycott, divest, and sanction. Yeah. He said the occupation of the West Bank is profoundly evil. Apartheid is profoundly evil.
Yeah.
BDS is a righteous movement for liberation, one supported by queer people and Jewish people and socialists and abolitionists, all those who know another world is possible. It's called solidarity, and it's profoundly good.
So I can't see how we could win in New York with that. Just right there. What did he say about queer and Jew? How can he win anything?
Mamdani said, "I've watched in horror as Israel massacred Palestinian babies. In New York, if you donate to the IDF unit that bombed these tents and filled with children, you'll get a tax break. Tell your legislator not on our dime." And
but that's okay that Hamas took all those people on what is it, October 7th?
October 7th.
That was okay with those babies, and that was different. Okay.
That's right.
Go on.
Unbelievable. Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk about Mamdani's communist background.
Okay, good.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. Listen to Mamdani's communist background. Listen to the whole thing. But first, listen to the Bee Gees.
The Beatles.
Sorry.
All right, so Mamdani, I have a hard time with that. Mamdani was born to Mahmoud Mamdani, a radical anti-colonist academic, and Mira Nar, his mother, a leftist filmmaker known for advancing identity-driven narratives. His political ideology is shaped not by American values, but by a post-colonial grievance framework that views the West, particularly the United States, as a force to be dismantled, rather than defended, dismantled rather than defended. His grandfather, once a respected community leader in Uganda, never recovered after being expelled by the then president of Uganda, Idi Amin. Mamdani has publicly reflected on this legacy of dispossession, framing his politics around concepts of statelessness and systemic injustice.
This is the same movement that spawned at its core Barack Obama.
Really?
The idea that the United States is a colonial power, even though we never had colonies. We had Philippines, but we let it go. And with no colonies, we're somehow colonialist.
Yeah.
And the whole movement of Britain, France, and other countries to dominate the world by making everybody their colony is, in his view, what moves the United States.
I'm sorry.
And he feels that the need is to discipline and curb the power of the United States above all else.
Yeah, one guy.
And in the same concept, he sees the Palestinians as the victims of a colonial policy, with disregarding the fact that they're not a democracy and Israel is.
Yeah.
And that Israel became in charge of them after they launched 4 wars against Israel and lost.
Yeah, he co-founded at the Bowdoin College, he co-founded the school's first chapter of the Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, an organization known for its radical anti-Israel activism and ties to the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, the BDS that we were talking about earlier. The SJP was founded by the dangerous anti-Semite Hatem Bazian, who called for the Intifada, or a violent uprising in America. He later worked across the country with various progressive groups to organize electoral campaigns and push socialist policies, particularly in healthcare. DSA ties and socialist coalition building. Lux just told me he has me with the pen on the air. Since entering politics, Mamdani has emerged as a key figure in the Democratic Socialist of America movement in New York, the DSA, the most prominent Marxist organization in the United States. This coalition has relentlessly pushed for policies like abolishing cash bail, defunding the police, dismantling private housing markets, and expanding government control over everything from utilities to real estate. Mamdani is the embodiment of a dangerous merger, militant Islam weaponizing through socialist infrastructure. He's not running to serve New York. He's running to subvert it from within. Mamdani has come under fire for his extreme anti-Israel positions. In May 2021, he was filmed leading the boycott, divestment, and sanctions chant at New York rally and has publicly condemned U.S. officials for visiting Israel. That's nice, right? He calls BDS a legitimate and nonviolent movement, despite its explicit goal of economically dismantling the Jewish state. In reality, BDS has fueled a surge of anti-Semitic harassment and violence in New York and nationwide. Mamdani's support is not mere politics. It's a declaration of hostility towards the Jewish community.
Yep.
Man,
it's
unbelievable what I just read.
It's one thing to see Jews voting against Trump and backing a pathetic candidate like Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
But to see them actually supporting an anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-Jewish candidate, the basis of whose campaign is to run against the Jewish people and the Jewish culture, is absolutely insane.
Insane. Didn't he not want to talk? He something about the Holocaust. He didn't. He didn't
comment. He didn't talk. Well, after the October 7th attack, he said that the Israelis were partially to blame for that, and has never said anything pro-Israel.
Chuck Schumer's liking him. This guy, he endorsed him. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, I see him endorsing him, on Wednesday, praise Mamdani following his Democratic primary victory in New York City's mayoral race, saying that Mamdani's socialist campaign, which includes proposals such as government-run grocery stores, resonates with voters. Yeah, okay.
Imagine that the same place you buy milk is the same place you go to buy stamps or to mail letters. It's closed every day. It closes at 4 o'clock.
Lunchtime.
Lunchtime and everything.
Oh, God. And they don't know what they're talking about half the time either. I think what's clear is that Mamdani's relentless focus on affordability had great appeal all across the city of New York, Jeffries said.
Yeah, affordability.
Yeah.
The Rent Guidelines Board says that the costs of operating a rent-stabilized apartment have gone up by 7%. So they award a rent hike of 7%. And Mamdani says, freeze the rents. Well, when you freeze the rents, who the hell is going to build?
Yeah, who's going to build?
Who's going to create housing?
Nobody.
And if you don't have a landlord, you're not going to have a tenant. And to say he's going to solve the problem of homelessness by pushing every landlord out of business.
Well, he will. And here's why he will. Because all the landlords are going to pull out. They're going to go to Florida, Texas, wherever they're going to go and build housing there, right? So you're going to have empty buildings in Manhattan. And he's going to put all the homeless and old people in empty buildings. It's going to be a blank show.
Mamdani defended the phrase, globalize the Intifada. The Intifada was the massive protest, including shootings and killings of Jews in Israel, and he wants to globalize it. He refused to acknowledge Israel's right to exist. He expressed support for the BDS movement and declared that if elected mayor, he will not visit the Jewish state. What a great guy for a city that is known to have more Jews than any city in the world, including Jerusalem or any city in Israel.
That's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. How would the Jewish people vote for this guy? I don't get it. Are we going to 6, Dick?
Yeah.
So Lawler calls on Hochul to oppose Mamdani. I call on Kathy Hochul and all New York Democrats to immediately state if they endorse Mamdani for New York City mayor and all the radical socialist policies he's endorsed on his campaign. Lawler, who also launched a bid, could and I hope will launch a bid for governor's race next year. I really hope he does. I like the guy. And then you got the Jewish group warns U.S. to be the new pro-Muslim London. Imagine that. So we got a song for this, too. I'm always in a New York state of mind. I love that song. After beating former Governor Andrew Cuomo in New York's Democratic primary, Mamdani, a Muslim, proud communist, and an open supporter of jihad against America and Jews, may well become the mayor of New York City. That's crazy. A man who marched with supporters of Hamas, advocates BDS, is funded by CARE, demanded... What's that? Hamas, yeah. Demanded Israel's destruction of the day after October 7th, and so much more. Might become mayor of the most Jewish city in America. This is unbelievable. And New York will likely be a target by Mamdani's unrepentant call to globalize the Intifada, which was in 1987, was the first Intifada, the uprising and resistance.
Basically, it's the modern Holocaust.
That's what it is. There's so many of this disaster, but at the base problem is that Jewish leaders fail to fight the defamation of the Jewish state and its supporters. The libels who normalize, they allow apartheid, genocide, starvation, colonialism, etc., have turned it into slogans of lethal hatred, now screaming at Jews on the streets. Horrible. The leaders of the ADL, AJC federations, JCRC, and most non-Orthodox rabbis and so many nonprofits allow the mainstream media to defame Israel, then allowed campuses to be taken over by anti-Zionist professors and student groups. First of all, ADL is the Anti-Defamation League. The AJC is American Jewish Committee, and the JCRC is the Jewish Community Relations Council. While either opposing the deportation of Jew-hating Muslims visa holders or staging gaudy galas honoring themselves and useless social media cronies, Main Street Jewish nonprofits of every stripe ignored this existential threat. They're betraying us utterly. Yep. It's horrible they're not standing up.
It's unbelievable, and we are watching really the treason. The self-destructive treason. Of the Jewish community.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. They're literally eating their own.
Well, you got Trump backers that they're rallying. Trump's right-wing supporters have hit Mamdani with a barrage of Islamophobic hate since he stunned the political world Tuesday night by winning. MAGA loyalists have claimed that Mamdani might impose religious, check this out, Sharia law in the Big Apple. Imagine Sharia law.
One of the big tenets of the Sharia law is to oppose gays, oppose homosexuality.
Right, and you can't walk into their neighborhood.
Kill gays.
Right.
And gay New Yorkers are supporting a guy who's advocating this.
Wow. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, she posted a fake Photoshop image of the Statue of Liberty draped in a burqa, the covering worn by some observant Muslim women. This hits hard, Greene tweeted. President Donald Trump Jr. reposted a tweet claiming the New Yorker for 9/11 voted for 9/11, adding New York has fallen. Stephen Miller, the hardline deputy White House chief of staff, blamed Mamdani's win on unchecked immigration. New York City is the clearest warning yet of what happens to a society when it fails to control migration, he tweeted after the Mamdani's win. Trump himself has trashed this guy as 100% communist lunatic. I love it. But so far has refrained from attacking him for his faith. We've had radical lefties before, but this is getting a little ridiculous. Trump wrote on his social media thing. He looks terrible. His voice is grating. He's not very smart. Trump has not yet endorsed anyone in November, but he will. I hope he goes for Curtis, I'll tell you that. He has spoken highly of Adams, who is running against Monday. See, I got to tell you, that's going to hurt Adams that Trump is if he endorses him, because the people that are voting for Adams don't like Trump. Mm-hmm. So that's going to hurt. I hope he does endorse Adams, actually. Good. Some conservatives and big money donors have rallied behind Cuomo, Mamdani's main opponent in primary. But Cuomo appears to be unlikely to mount.
But he is. Yeah.
What?
He is going to run.
Oh, that was written a couple days ago. Curtis Sliwa is another obvious choice for Trump's fans to rally behind in November. We have to rally behind Curtis, absolutely, because we can't have any of those other guys. And I think that's it. Just rally behind Curtis, everyone, please.
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely the fundamental issue of the future of the city of New York.
Absolutely.
What is New York without its downtown, without the real estate community, without Wall Street, without investors? New York would become a ghost town. This is the self-immolation of a city. And it's happening by people who don't care if it burns down, don't care what it is, because they're so driven by envy, driven by greed.
Oh, God.
That they can't stand that there are other people who are making money.
You know, history's repeating itself right now. It's like a mirror. Dinkins and then Giuliani. Dinkins, the place was a sloppy, disgusting place to be back with, 78, 79, whatever it was, right? And Giuliani came in and straightened everything out. They hated him. Oh, you're a racist, you're this. And that's Curtis now. The city is turned into a piece of garbage right now. And Curtis will come and say, sorry, call me whatever you want to call me. I'm fixing this crap. And that's what's going to happen.
The thing about the left is that it is driven by envy. There's a great story in Russia about a Russian devout guy who died, Russian Orthodox, and he went to heaven. St. Peter said, is there anything I can do for you? And he said, well, my house was destroyed and I was killed in a fire. My next door neighbor, Ivan, I would like him to get killed in a fire and have his house burned down too. Right. That's my one wish.
Yeah.
This is a political movement based upon envy. Envy isn't like jealousy. Jealousy is a constructive emotion that says, I want what you have.
Right, that guy's got a beautiful car across the street. I want a car like that. What do I got to do to get that car?
Envy says, I want that car to crash and
because I can't have it.
Kill the guy because I can't have it.
Right.
And that's what is taking over New York now. That's what's taken over the Democratic Party. Now, as a supporter of Trump, I love the fact that the Democrats are self-immolating and that they're putting this guy up as the candidate in their largest electoral base. But as a New Yorker, this is absolutely a catastrophe. It marks really the death of New York City.
Absolutely.
If this guy wins, New York City is over.
First of all, if Curtis doesn't win, New York City is over. I don't know about with Adams, but even still, we need Curtis to come in and just clean it up. Just clean up. He'll put the right people in his administration. He'll get the right police guys running the police. He'll do the right thing. Otherwise, this man, Donnie, forget about it. What's going to happen? All right.
So when we come back, we're going to talk about the most important judicial ruling of the Trump administration so far and a massive victory for Trump. Let's go to Mike in Queens. Okay. Mike in Queens asked if Mamdani was marching in the gay pride parade.
Yeah, okay.
The answer is no. All of the supporters of gay rights are basically facing the death penalty under Mamdani.
If he becomes
under
mayor.
Sharia law.
Right.
The Orthodox...
They should be dragging him through the parade.
Yeah, right. One
Curtis
of the big
is,
tenets,
by the way, Curtis is there.
One of the big tenets of the Sharia law is to kill and oppose gays.
Yeah, they were throwing him off roofs.
Yeah.
Horrible.
The court has ruled against nationwide injunctions. This is an absolutely key decision for the Trump administration. Let's go, Curtis.
Hank Williams Don't fence me in. You're on, Dick Morris. You're on.
That local district court judges cannot issue blanket national injunctions. That's the most important decision the court has made since Trump took office. The 6-3 decision in which Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett and all the other questionable conservatives lined up in support, and it was only the 3 liberal judges who opposed, said that the Constitution does not allow a district court to make national policy. Universal injunctions, the court said, likely exceed the equitable authority that Congress has given to the federal courts. Now, the cause of the ruling, the case in the ruling, was about birthright citizenship. And the court said, we're not going to rule on that for a little while. First, we're going to rule about the issuance of nationwide injunctions. And it targets a standing order that automatically halts deportations for 48 hours, giving the detained immigrants time to file habeas petitions. Chief Judge George Russell III issued the contested order in May, establishing a blanket policy that applies to all immigration cases. The Trump administration argued that the blanket policy violates constitutional principles, and the Supreme Court precedent requires that judges have to make a case-by-case determination rather than issuing sweeping bans. Trump called the 6-3 decision, which cut along ideological lines, a monumental victory for the Constitution and for the separation of powers and the rule of law. I was elected on a historic mandate, but in recent months we've seen a handful of radical left judges effectively try to override the rightful power of the president, Trump said. It was a grave threat to democracy, frankly. Instead of merely ruling on the immediate case before them, these judges have attempted to dictate the law for the entire nation. In the meantime, Pam Bondi, the AG, highlighted that 35 of the 40 nationwide injunctions against Trump over the last 5 months have come from just 5 judges. You know that the issue remained a bipartisan problem that lasted 5 different presidents.
Only 5 judges out of the whole country.
So what happens is that the left, whenever Trump does something, issue a call for an injunction against it.
They go to
a court. Go to one of the 5 judges who's a radical crazy out of 400 or 500 in the country and get them to issue an injunction.
I want to look up who these people are.
And the injunction covers people well outside their judicial district. It's a nationwide injunction. The Justice Department made nationwide injunctions, also known as universal injunctions, a chief issue, bringing a case before the Supreme Court in an effort to at least limit that power and free Trump to pursue his policy slate without the inhibition of regional courts. Such injunctions have helped opponents of the president's agenda slow down or outright pause his immigration policies, particularly in the fight over the constitutionality of Trump's effort to limit birthright citizenship. Pam Bondi said, today in 6-3 opinion, Justice Barrett, Amy Coney Barrett, correctly holds that the district court lacks authority to enter nationwide or universal injunctions. These lawless injunctions give relief to anyone in the world instead of the parties before the court, as the Supreme Court held today. They turn district courts into the imperial judiciary. She added, it's the president's authority under his executive branch to do everything to fight for the American people, and he will continue to do that. That's why he was overwhelmingly elected. So this is vital. This means that the dominant liberal weapon that they've used since Trump won the election, the nationwide injunction from a district court, can no longer be used. It effectively disarms the left in a major, major way.
Thank God for the Supreme Court. And now they decline to rule on birthright citizenship. So we have a song for that, right, Dick?
Yep.
So the Supreme Court partially allowed President Trump's birthright citizenship executive order on June 22nd in a decision that said universal injunctions likely exceed court's authority.
What they did was they took a case that the left had brought to enjoin Trump from enforcing his ban on birthright citizenship, the policy that says if you're born here, you become a U.S. citizen. He wants to restrict that to people who were born here but whose parents came here legally. And the court was asked to enjoin that policy and said, we're not going to rule on that. We'll do that later. Right now, what we need to do is to stop a district court from issuing a ruling that overrides the president, overrides Congress, and overrides all the other judges in the country. And by 6-3, they voted to do that. And they sidestepped the issue of birthright citizenship. It was a very courageous thing to do.
All right. Florida's attorney, this is great. Did you guys hear about the Everglades prison? This is great. Florida has begun construction on a 1,000-bed migrant detention center on an old airstrip in Big Cypress National Preserve, a protected part of the Everglades. The facility, which officials described as temporary, will consist primarily of large tents and trailers and is expected to house undocumented immigrants detained both within and outside Florida. Saying escapes would have
escapees would have to contend
with alligators and pythons. Florida's Attorney General James Uthmeier revealed plans for what he calls alligator Alcatraz during a Fox Business thing. Florida proposes massive detention facility with natural deterrents, the natural deterrents being alligators. Uthmeier reveals plans for what he calls alligator Alcatraz. The state is considering a large tract of Miami-Dade County land in the Everglades for this. According to Uthmeier, if detainees manage to escape, only the alligators and pythons are waiting, making a natural prison. This is so funny. The remote facility would serve dual purposes, housing suspected illegal immigrants and processing their case quickly.
Yeah, very, very quickly, guys.
Hurry up. The property comes with
alligator.
The property
so please rule quickly.
And if you run from the alligator, the python will squeeze you and then you'll get caught. The property comes with a key advantage, an existing airstrip. This is cool. They got an existing airstrip that would allow deportation flights to depart directly from the site. That I like. That's kind of cool, right? Mm-hmm. Right. This would eliminate the need for costly transportation, from other airports and all that type of stuff. The proposal represents a creative solution to immigration detention challenges with the remote Everglade location. This is great. Uthmeier, I don't know how you say that name, Uthmeier, emphasizes that the isolated setting would make escape attempts nearly impossible while keeping the cost down. The land has been used for military and law enforcement training in the past, making it suitable for this type of. This is great, isn't it?
Yeah, this is incredible.
It's almost like it can't be true. Yeah, it's too funny.
Alligator Alcatraz. Alcatraz is an island in the middle of the bay, San Francisco Bay. Yeah. And if you escape, you have a long, dangerous swim
with sharks.
Yeah,
all around.
You're not going to make it to the coast.
Well, you call it Alligator Alley to get across. I think it's 41.
That's the road.
That's 41.
Right.
From like Naples over to Miami.
But here they actually have to go through the alligators and the pythons.
That's so great. I love it. We got 1 minute left. We got this.
Now, ICE now arrests 1,200 people per day.
ICE is, all right, you want to go? You do it, Dick.
ICE is now arresting nearly 1,200 immigrants a day and detaining more than 56,000 a day. They all said Trump couldn't do it, that this wouldn't work, that you couldn't have a mass deportation. But it's happening now.
He's got daily deportations of 1,100 of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement tries to move people out of the country. Experts say the president has had to battle significant headwinds to reach the 5-point months into his term. White House Deputy Chev Miller reported ICE last month to broaden its aperture of arrest. He said ICE must be more aggressive to significantly decrease the numbers of illegal immigrants who settled in the U.S. during the Biden administration. As a result, ICE is arresting far more migrants without criminal records. Out of June 14, 37% of roughly 40,000 ICE detainees had criminal convictions and 33% had pending criminal charges for a total criminal population of 70%. That was down from 77% in late May and significantly down from more than 94% in January at the end of the
Of course,
Biden
all these
administration.
people did break the law
Right.
and are criminals for coming here illegally. So we're talking about people who came here illegally, committed crimes, were tried, were sentenced, and then escaped the U.S. and decided to try to come back.
All right, so my speed reading, we were able to get out of this. On the way back, we'll talk more. See you guys.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group.
Wait, don't we have another intro that we're working on? What's that other intro, Lux? That's going to be our new intro. All right, then, get into this show.
Trump won a gigantic victory yesterday. Not only the court decision eliminating district nationwide injunctions, but the Senate passed, P-A-S-S-E-D, passed his big, beautiful bill to keep his tax cuts permanent, to expand the money for border security, to fight crime, to do a whole range of things that were absolutely essential. When Trump was first elected in 2016, he faced a choice. What does he move with first? Does he first move with Obamacare repeal and reform, or does he first move with a tax cut? And he made the wrong choice. He decided to go with Obamacare, and McCain vetoed that. And the result was that he did not pass his tax cuts until December of 2017. And that was too late to influence the elections in November of 2018. And as a result, the Democrats won Congress, won the House, beat 40 incumbent Republicans, converted the seats, and all of Trump's problems over the next 2 years, the two impeachments, the nonsense, the Iran, the Russia scandal, all that stuff happened because he lost the House, which happened because he didn't do the tax cuts in time. Now Trump has solved that problem and has done the tax cuts in plenty of time. But a bunch of Republicans demurred based on fairly minor and petty concerns, all of which could be addressed legislatively now that his big, beautiful bill has passed. And now it'll go be adjudicated with the House. There'll be some other minor changes. But fundamentally, the Trump administration is saved. And the future is very, very, very bright.
That's great.
In fact, nothing can derail it now. Thank God. I worked very hard on this, and I'm just so thrilled that this vote was cast.
And we got Sandra from Jersey who wants to talk about this
Okay.
also.
Hi,
Hi, Sandra.
Oh, yes, hello. This is one big, beautiful bill, 51 to 49. It's going to reach Donald Trump's desk on July 4th. What a patriotic day to get this
Yeah,
bill
right.
started,
Yes.
And
right?
what a brilliant offensive by Trump. He just held in there,
Yeah.
and when the legislators proposed all kinds of minor changes, he was flexible enough to make those changes.
That's what was key.
And he got those votes. It was incredible. Unbelievable
So-
performance.
Go on, Sandra.
Okay, so the two pricks like on the thorn, Rand Paul and Tillis, they say no, but he was able to convince Hawley and one other one. I
Josh
don't-
Hawley?
Susan Collins and
Yeah, well,
Lisa
you know,
Murkowski.
Really? He
Yeah.
convinced
Voted
Collins.
yes.
Wow.
Yeah, which is
So he
which
turned
is
them around.
amazing. What
It
he did
is.
was to get Collins's vote and Murkowski. He made special provisions for Maine and Alaska that addressed their specific concerns. Alaska was worried that they wouldn't get enough money for their rural hospitals, and Maine was worried that there wouldn't be an ability to have a work requirement. and Trump did a carve-out for those two states.
Awesome.
And they're minor in population, so their effect wasn't great.
Just the fact that you know that.
But it was brilliant that he did it. It was absolutely wonderful.
Wow, that was great. The guy is brilliant.
Now, at the same time,
Thank you, Sandra.
At the same time, Trump kicked 4 million illegals out of Obamacare.
The Trump administration announced major changes to Obamacare on Friday. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, finalized a rule that will save taxpayers billions while ending health care coverage for illegal immigrants under the DACA program, DACA being Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Taxpayers will save up to $12 billion in 26 alone. That's real money staying in Americans' pockets instead of funding a bloated system. CMS Administrator Dr. Oz explains the changes. CMS is restoring integrity to the ACA exchange by cracking down on fraud, protecting American taxpayer dollars, and ensuring coverage is there for those who truly need it. This is about putting patients first, stopping exploitation of the system, and realigning the program with the values of personal responsibility and fiscal discipline.
In this BBB bill, Trump added $150 billion for the deportation effort. The bill extends the border wall Trump built, till it's completed, and adds $150 billion for additional enforcement staff to throw these creeps out of the country. And that's why this bill is so important, and winning it is so vital.
And so many people didn't even know they were signed up for this Obamacare thing, this other thing. So Trump knows what he's doing. He's got it. So are we out of this thing right now,
yeah,
Dick?
We are.
All right. When we come back, we'll try to get John McLaughlin on the line.
Yep.
All right.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Dick Morris and Doug DePiro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. We have on the line now John McLaughlin.
Hey, John.
Who was Trump's pollster and the key element in the strategy that elected Trump in 24. Hi, John. How are you doing?
Hello, Dick. Hello, Doug.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, so, I do vote for President Trump when he's not talking to you. So,
so answer the question, John. Everybody's asking, will Mamdani win?
Right now, because of the Democratic advantage in New York City, the math, just go through the math. There's 70% of the voters in New York City, usually in a general election turnout, are Democrats. He now has their nomination. So for a one-on-one candidate to beat him, that candidate would need 40% of the Democrats to reject him. Think about this, because Donald Trump got almost 30% of the vote in New York City, and Lee Zeldin got over 30%. But you need statewide 35% to win the state. But in the city, when you helped Rudy Giuliani, when he won, there was probably double the amount of Republicans in the city. There's only 15% now. And so the math is like 70 to 15 in rough terms, Democrat to Republican. And right now, it's not a one-on-one Giuliani versus the Democrat versus or Bloomberg versus Mark Green. It's you've got a situation where you have three candidates, whether it's Andrew Cuomo on the independent line or Eric Adams on an independent line or Curtis Sliwa on a Republican line. And then you have there's a candidate on the Conservative Party line. There's this independent Tim Walden. He's got another line. Mamdani has the Democrat line. So he only needs like three-quarters of the Democrats, about 75%, to get over 50%. And with his opposition scattered, he could win with less than that. So we're in a very dangerous time because all the radical positions that you're talking about, I mean, we're talking about a guy who could legalize prostitution. He could legalize drug use. He's not. And when you talk about, he's not talking about like reducing the number of cops or defunding the police. He's talking about keeping criminal illegals in New York City. So the slogan
He said that he wants to be the Fidel Castro of New York City.
No, he actually used the guy's name,
Yeah.
Fidel Castro, really.
Right.
Yeah, so you've got to, and you made a point. He wasn't at the Pride Parade yesterday because he's in a religion that, like you said, they kill people who happen to be gay or lesbian or whatever. So you're dealing with a really radical candidate that right now we have to inform a lot of misinformed Democrats that they need to vote against him. And Dick, you were a Democrat. And you need a lot in New York State. The reason why you're a good pollster, I'm a good pollster, for decades, to win in New York, you had to win a lot of Democrats over to the Republican line to win. So here we've got to inform these Democrats that they have to reject Mamdani, and then you have to see who emerges from the other side as the leading candidate to beat him.
Yeah, I think the reason that Mamdani won is that Cuomo is such a flawed candidate. I mean, for God's sakes, you can vote for somebody who willingly put 6,000 people, risk their death and let them die by moving them out of nursing homes and out of hospitals and into nursing homes.
And lied about it later.
And then you got Adams, who was indicted, although dropped, and you have Mamdani. So who are you going to vote for? The Holocaust endorser, the genocide perpetrator, or the indicted former mayor, current mayor? And it's a very bad field. And Curtis is obviously the only good one. His background in fighting crime, he has normal values, and he'll be a good mayor of New York.
How do we get the liberals to vote for him, to like him? How does that happen?
Well, it's kind of the way Mamdani got where he was, because back in January I did a poll for Betsy McCoy with her Save Our City C3, and Cuomo had a 49 favorable but a 47 unfavorable among Democrats. And there was this guy, Brad Honan, putting out surveys. I don't know Brad, and he was putting out surveys saying Mamdani was in second place but way behind Cuomo. It probably backfired because the leading candidate that Cuomo siphoned up inside of the unfavorables for Cuomo, so that in effect Mamdani, if he got 44%, well, Cuomo had unfavorables in the high 40s, maybe 50% at the end. So who's going to be the leading candidate? It's really important that if it's Sliwa, Adams, or Cuomo, they have to be the one who can beat Mamdani, and they have to show that, and the other votes will come to him, because Honan put out a survey right after the primary saying that Cuomo was tied to him 39-39. Well, tied's not a good spot. And they said if Adams doesn't run, he was ahead. But that poll didn't disclose party or age or race. And if you underpolled, say if you had too many older voters and too younger voters, chances are Mamdani's ahead. That would have skewed the poll in Cuomo's favor. If you had too few Democrats, it would have skewed the poll in Cuomo's favor. So you really
I had a theory that I want to return to now, that the way to survive in New York politics is for the race not to be about you. Right. If the race is about you, you're going to lose. Right. If you can make the race about your opponent, you have a chance to win.
And how bad they are?
Yeah. And in this case, if the race is about Mamdani, there's no way he's going to win. But if the race is about Cuomo,
interesting.
If it's about Sliwa, if it's about Sliwa, if it's about Adams, then they have a chance to win.
Interesting.
The problem is it has to be about one of them for them to have a shot at winning. But right now, the first step is to make this race about Mamdani. And we're doing that now. We're working hard at that. And I hope that in the next polling, Mamdani has 60 or 70% unfavorable, which is what he deserves. And then we can at leisure pick a good mayor for New York. But otherwise, this guy threatens to totally destroy New York City. I don't mean underfunded. I don't mean cut back services. I mean destroy it. New York City is created by an act of will, by investors and Wall Street and real estate and businessmen. And if they leave New York, it's over. and there's no way we can rekindle that. And yet we have that threat facing us.
Wow.
Yeah, but you know what New York's more about? New York's more about the outer boroughs, the working class. Like when I was young, I grew up in the Bronx, and I always kid President Trump because he'll talk about like we were going to lose Manhattan in the 2016 primary. And I said, look, you grew up in Queens, I grew up in the Bronx. Manhattan Republicans don't really like us. So I said, but you got to understand, it's the working classes in the outer boroughs that make up the backbone of New York. And Mamdani got less than half the Democrats to vote for him. But what is he going to do to the working class homeowners in Jamaica, Queens? When's he going to raise their property taxes? When's he going to? He's going to raise taxes on everybody, collapse the services. You won't be safe.
He just said he would raise taxes more in white neighborhoods than in other neighborhoods.
How does he get away with that?
I don't believe him, Dick, because he's going to raise taxes on everybody.
Right.
But you know what? He said that. Remember, Eric Adams had this week had a Good for Adams press conference on the steps of City Hall with all these African American leaders supporting him because they're the largest, ethnic group. In effect, they're about a quarter of the vote in the city, and you got and you could have a quarter Hispanics, but usually they come out like 15-20%. But by census, they could be the largest groups. So when he says, I'm going to make white property tax owners pay more money, he's trying to get, divide the city by race to benefit himself. And he was trying to, take votes from Adams. But, we got to look at him and say, he's gonna wreck it for all New Yorkers, regardless of race, color, creed, whatever.
Right.
And again, but New York is really it's the working middle class in the outer boroughs and the immigrants that came here trying to get ahead, trying to succeed, own their own businesses, get their kids to go to good schools, be safe in your communities, not be a victim of crime. Well, Mamdani's solutions are really problems.
He wants to slice the New York Police Department, basically eliminate police protection, allow anyone who's arrested for a crime to go free without bail.
So let me understand this. The only people that are going to benefit from this guy are going to be homeless and people on the dole. That sounds like it. And the immigrants, obviously.
And criminals.
And criminals, right. Like
criminals, yeah. And
wow.
He's talking about he could legalize prostitution. He's talking about that. He's talking about which means more.
Yeah,
human
but being a
trafficking.
Muslim, how can he do that if he's a Muslim?
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know.
And,
Wow.
I don't know.
And the and his programs, going beyond the program, the whole idea of the leadership of the world's largest Jewish city being anti-Semitic. It means the death of a religion as well as the death of a city. This is the Holocaust on steroids. It's unbelievable. And you think we have a shot to beat him, John?
Only if we create what you said. You hit on the exact thing. We got to raise his negatives over 50%, towards 60, and maybe 70. But once you raise his negatives that high, voters will look for the candidate, the challenger, who's best able to beat him.
I mean,
but that first step's important. To educate them to how wrong this guy would be as mayor. It would be the destruction of New York City.
I think Sliwa makes a lot of sense, but I think that's step two. Step one is to raise Mamdani's negatives,
right?
To
Which should be easy, Dick. Right? That should be really easy to raise that. You just got to get people to listen.
Yeah. Well, it should be. There's enough evidence out there.
And it's an education process. All you have to do is, like he was on Meet the Press today, and he's talking about these radical ideas. All you have to do is get the videotape, put it in digital ads, get it out to the voters, and let them know how radical and how wrong he is for New York City. We've got to stop him.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, John. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, John. Hey, listen, how do you like my new intro? Did you hear it?
I heard it, and I don't know. Dick, aren't you in charge of this show?
Nominally.
Is that what you were thinking? Oh, my God, he's taking over this Italian guy.
Okay, when we come back,
all
we're
right,
going
John,
to talk about
thank you.
Some great work that Ted Cruz is doing about Chinese influence on the environmental movement. This
Go on.
week, Senator Ted Cruz dropped a bombshell during a Senate Judiciary hearing. Cruz revealed evidence that China is running a systematic campaign against American energy through a network of climate groups, lawyers, and even judges. He said, "We're witnessing now a systematic campaign against American energy," Cruz said. "There's a coordinated assault by the radical left, backed and paid for by the Chinese Communist Party, to seize control of our courts, to weaponize litigation against U.S. energy producers, all in order to undermine America's energy dominance." Cruz's investigation found that Energy Foundation China, a group with direct ties to the Chinese Communist Party, has been funneling money to American climate activist groups. These groups then flood our courts with lawsuits against gas and oil companies. The Chinese plan works in 3 steps. First, the Chinese money flows to American climate groups. Second, these groups file mountains of lawsuits to block pipelines, ban gas power cars, and bankrupt energy companies. And third, they train judges to rule in their favor. According to a report cited by Cruz, Energy Foundation China has paid out nearly $1 billion in grants to hundreds of climate reforms groups in the last 20 years. This isn't pocket change. It's a massive investment in changing America's energy landscape. Many of the foundation's leaders previously held senior positions in the Chinese government. As Scott Walter, the chairman of the Capital Research Center, testified, "I'm skeptical that former Chinese communist officials are interested in doing anything that would harm their country." This is fundamental. China's weakness is that it has a huge population and no domestic energy. They have very little oil. They import over 90% of the oil that they use. And they don't have a lot of nuclear power. And they're basically running on fumes. And their hope had been that the United States would not exploit a lot of oil, would not export a lot of oil, and that they could take over the world without really having sufficient energy supplies. And what they're doing is using the courts, using the injunctions that the court just declared illegal, to get district judges to rule nationally against measures to increase oil production. And by stopping America from becoming energy dominant and energy self-reliant, their hope is to cripple the United States.
How are they using the courts?
Well, they bring actions for injunctions against pipelines, against oil drilling. Trump just announced huge new areas for offshore oil drilling, basically taking an area the size of Britain and declaring it open for oil drilling in the ocean. They'll bring an injunction against that. The injunction is funded. The legal expenses are funded by a Chinese company called Energy Foundation China.
That's in America.
That's in America. That's paid $1 billion to environmental groups to harm the United States.
Wow.
And it really amounts to subversion, using our court system and using the environmentalism of our people against America. Now, at the same time they're doing this, China is the leading polluter in the world.
Yeah.
China's the only country not to reduce its carbon emissions. In the last 10 years, the United States has reduced its carbon emissions dramatically, and China has increased its emissions by the same amount. So while they're sabotaging the environment globally, they're trying to get the United States to enforce environmental rules so that they can dominate the world.
Imagine if Iran cut off the Straits of Hormuz with the oil. Forget about what would happen to China.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
Now,
okay, bye-bye.
Now, another story that also bears some explanation and is worth talking about is debanking. This is something that goes on a lot, where a conservative group, a pro-Trump group, finds that the bank closes its bank account, won't allow it to deposit more money, won't allow it to spend money. It's called debanking. And you never get notice that you're being debanked. It just happens, and they never tell you why. And the Fed is now investigating debanking, and it is no longer allowing banks to factor reputation risk into its bank examinations. That means that the Federal Reserve Board can't come in and say, your bank's reputation is at risk because of its policies, and we're going to rate you down because of that. And then the bank uses that as an excuse to tell conservative and right-wing groups, we won't accept your accounts. We'll close your accounts. The decision is a significant shift in how regulators assess banks. Particular scrutiny intensifies over claims that some institutions have denied services to lawful businesses, such as cryptocurrency firms, religious organizations, or political groups, based on subjective concerns about reputational harm. Although banks have wide discretion over account relationships, critics argue that invoking reputational risk can mask discriminatory decisions. These concerns have been fueled by growing bipartisan calls to ensure fair access to financial services. This is how debanking works, said the senior counsel at the Alliance Defending Freedom. The bank closes the accounts, does not give a clear reason, and cites some kind of risk toleration policy for denial, under circumstances that look very suspiciously like it was because of your religious or your political views. For too long, unelected regulators have used the vague and subjective concept of reputational risk to push political ideology under the guise of bank supervision. The act proposed in Congress, the FIRM Act, restores neutrality and integrity to our financial regulatory system and protects the right of all Americans to access banking services without fear of unlawful discrimination. I know any number of conservative activists who've had their accounts closed, their money frozen, and without any explanation, they can't use their bank. And they're absolutely neutered. And this has been allowed to continue. And the citing here is reputational risk, which is such a vague, amorphous concept. And the Federal Reserve Board is now investigating this and may close this down. This is all the result of the Trump effect and reviewing the discrimination against conservative and right-wing groups. The Supreme Court has also increased the grounds for challenging gender change laws. The Supreme Court ruling last week upheld a Tennessee ban on transgender medical procedures for minors, and it's rapidly transforming legal battles across the country, handing state lawmakers a sweeping win and signaling a new judicial standard that restricts the reach of gender identity claims under the Constitution. What happens is that when the constitutionality of a statute is challenged in federal court, the judges can rule based on rational relationship, which says there's some reason for it, or strict scrutiny, which says it absolutely can't be discriminatory. And now the court has ruled that it will only apply rational basis to laws about gender change. So that if a state like Tennessee bans transgender medical procedures for minors, it has to have a rational basis for that case for the court to go along. The judge ruled 6-3 that Tennessee's Protecting Children from Gender Mutilation Act, which bans the use of puberty blockers, hormone treatments, and surgeries intended to help minors identify as the opposite sex, does not violate the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. Rejecting Biden's arguments, the High Court applied the lower rational basis standard, affirming that states have broad authority to regulate experimental medical treatments. Writing for the majority for once, Chief Judge John Roberts, emphasized that Tennessee's law targets age and medical diagnoses, not transgender status or sex. It satisfies the basis for rational review. There are many conceivable reasons why the state of facts could be the basis for the classification. The court rejected the notion that the Equal Protection Law clause somehow institutionalizes one side's view of an active medical debate, meaning that if the Tennessee legislature decides that children cannot be forced really to have surgeries or hormone treatments to change their gender, that they're allowed to do that and would not be a violation of the Constitution.
You know, I think that there needs to be legislation, needs to be a law that says you can't touch the kid until he's 18. Let him decide when he's an adult.
Yep.
That's just what has to happen now.
That's basically what Tennessee just did.
Right.
And the court just upheld.
Right. That's got to go federal. That's got to go across the nation.
Yeah. Now, the groups that support transgender surgery were trying to say that you have a constitutional right to change your gender if you want to, even if you're 10 years old.
Yeah? You mean they want a constitutional right to change somebody's, a 10-year-old's gender?
That's right.
Not the person.
And the court just ruled that you can't do that.
Right.
And that this is not a violation of the equal protection laws. One of the things that the left has been trying to do lately is to enact a uniform global tax, which would be a tax rate that would be applied to every company and every taxpayer in the world.
That comes to America, that comes to us, or just...
Well, in America, yeah.
Right.
But the idea is you enact it in America and you apply it to everybody.
How could that happen?
What they're saying is that they're suggesting, the G7 group suggested that there be an international tax, a global tax on all transactions and all companies, and that you can't lower it in one country. When the U.S. cut its corporate tax rate under Trump and now has made those tax cuts permanent, these globalists say we're asking everybody in the world to impose a 20% tax rate on corporations. If the U.S. wants to impose a 12% tax rate or a 15% tax rate, that's illegal and needs our consent to do that. And what's happening here is that Trump has announced we're not going along with that. We're not letting an international body set our corporate tax rate. We will not have a global minimum tax.
So bravo to Trump and Scott Bessent.
Bravo, exactly. And it averts a major danger, which was to possibly have a minimum global tax applied to all corporations.
Wow.
Now, you know that abortion has been a key issue in our politics during this year. And the Dobbs decision that basically reversed Roe v. Wade, everybody said that when the Dobbs decision comes down, it's going to ban abortion, you're going to cut back on abortion rights, and reproductive freedom will be compromised. But it now turns out that the number of abortions have actually increased after the Dobbs decision.
Well, I'm not happy about that.
Yeah, but I'm happy that
It's the
fears
states.
that the left was pandering to and ran in the last campaign turned out to be not true. Go ahead. Let's hear Madonna on this.
Yeah.
Two outcomes appeared certain in the months after the Supreme Court's June 22 decision in Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization. Abortions would decline, and the repercussions from the fall of Roe v. Wade would usher in a new era of dominance for the Democratic Party. 3 years later, neither scenario has materialized. Republicans rebounded in November to take the House, the Senate, and the White House, and the pace of abortions has defied all expectations by continuing to rise. Abortion volume in 24 is higher than it was in 22 or 23. There were 1.14 million abortions in 24, or about 95,000 monthly, up from 1.06 million, or 88,000 monthly, in 23. And 22 it was about 80,000. It went from 80,000 to 88,000 to 95,000 per month. So much for the entire basis of the Kamala Harris campaign, which was that the Trump administration would stamp out abortion, would make it illegal, and make it impossible for women to choose. Remember the whole chanting, "We're not going back,"
Yeah.
and the speeches at their convention?
Yeah.
Well, it didn't happen. The number of abortions has increased, not decreased. Women are finding that there are many jurisdictions that will allow abortion, even if a few won't, that they can just take a bus to that state.
That's it.
And they're finding that the restrictions on abortion are very limited, and that there is still the abortion pill that accounts for 2/3 of the abortions. So this is an entire issue, an entire prophecy of doom and gloom.
Which they do anyway.
That was the basis of
yeah.
the whole Democratic Party, and it just hasn't happened.
Well, that's the strategy anyway, across the board. Doom and gloom.
The facts catch up with the rhetoric.
Yeah, right.
I wish we had known this when the Harris campaign started. That their claim that the Dobbs decision would set us back to the era of coat hanger abortions and make women
alleyway,
whatever.
body. Right.
And hundreds of millions of women voted Democrat to protect the right to choose. Now, it turns out that without any vote on their part, the right to choose has continued, and the federalism behind the court's decision, which basically leaves it up to each individual state,
Right.
has protected the right to choose for the vast, vast, vast majority of women.
Well, listen, the Supreme Court just ruled it's okay to cut Planned Parenthood funding, so that's a good thing. In the 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court okayed Trump's plan to cut funding to the Planned Parenthood.
Yeah,
Good for
Planned
them.
Parenthood began as a birth control group based on Margaret Sanger's work.
Right.
But it has since become an abortion mill, an abortion provider. And the federal government funds that. And the essence of the Dobbs decision is government neutrality. Let each state decide what it's going to do, and let the Fed stop funding abortions by funding the Planned Parenthood group.
Right. If there's enough people in the state that want it or don't want it, they vote for it, and that's what they get. That's the way it should be.
So when we come back, Trump scored a huge victory at the NATO meeting this month. He got NATO to agree to a 5% of GDP threshold for defense spending.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Last year, Donald Trump challenged NATO to increase the amount that it spends on defense. He basically said, I'm not going to defend you if you're not going to defend yourself.
Yeah, right. If you're not going to pay up.
Everybody howled that he was trying to kill NATO, that he was isolationist, that America was pulling out of the world. And now members of the NATO alliance have agreed to increasing their defense spending to 5% of GDP within the next decade. Major victory for Trump. Ahead of the NATO summit this week at The Hague, members agreed in principle to increasing individual defense spending to 5% of their country's GDP. And the head of NATO said Donald Trump was right. We have to go up to this level, and we need to have this to defend ourselves against the increasing Russian aggression we're seeing around the world.
Nevertheless, the New Deal, which came in the wake of pressure from the Trump administration, stipulates that at least 3.5% of the GDP must be spent directly on military needs, while the addition of 1.5% can be devoted to related defense costs. He's brilliant. I don't care. This guy, people have a lot to say about him, and he talks a lot of crap on TV. He's friggin' brilliant.
Yeah. And basically, everybody in the analysis of Ukraine is saying that Europe can now step up to the plate and provide the aid to Ukraine that they want from the United States. That this is a European problem and the Europeans are going to take care of it.
You know, he said that we were stepped on forever, and we were. We were just funding all kinds of stuff in Europe and around the world. And he finally said, what is with this? Enough is enough. You guys pony up a little bit of your jack.
Exactly. And Trump is now imposing garnishment on 2 million student loan borrowers. 6 million student loan borrowers are 90 days or more past due. And nearly 2 million borrowers could move into default in July and have their pay docked by the government.
Wow. Trump touts Iran damage, blasts New York Times and CNN for downplaying. That was horrible. And even Hegseth, he was great with them also. Anyway, what Trump said, let's just talk about that. The president spent a
Let's
large...
start with what Trump did. Lux.
With the bombs. That's it? Ooh. I think there's one more. Well, you know what it is? They said he was going to build a golf course, and he already made 3 holes.
Oh, God. Oh, my God.
You didn't see that? I saw
No,
that.
that's
somewhere.
great.
That's pretty funny.
But, you know, ever since the attacks took place, the left and media has been saying, oh, you didn't really do much. You didn't really hurt Iran at all.
Yeah, right.
But it's now clear that it is, that it was, that we destroyed the nuclear capacity and we blew it to kingdom come.
And he said that
Quote.
they found Iran's nuclear capabilities and had been set back by months. We think we hit them so hard and so fast they didn't get to move, Trump said while slamming the Times and CNN for their reporting. We destroyed the nuclear. It's blown up to kingdom come. He even compared the attack to a nuclear bomb detonated in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Wow, in 1945. Wow. This ended a war in a different way, he said. And it did. Everyone said, oh, you're starting a war. No way. You basically put them aside that they can't go to war with us right now. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, who ordered a Pentagon investigation into the initial assessment leak per Politico's Paul McClary, Hegseth said at the news conference there was a low confidence in the initial report on the damage, adding, if you want to make an assessment at what happened at Fordo, get a big shovel and go deep because Iran's nuclear program is obliterated. Iran's former foreign ministry said today that their nuclear installations were badly damaged but didn't provide many details.
Meantime, Trump announced that Israeli officials believe that the airstrike targeting an Iranian nuclear site over the weekend has made it totally inoperable
And
set the
obliterated.
regime back years.
Right.
The devastating U.S. strike on Fordo destroyed the site's critical infrastructure and rendered the enrichment facility totally inoperable. The Atomic Energy Commission says the American strikes have set back Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons for many, many years to come.
Wow. Unbelievable. Now, Rubio warns off China from helping Iran. It was Secretary Marco Rubio who made the strategic move directly challenging Beijing to rein in its alley during a Sunday interview. This is what I said earlier about the Strait of Hormuz. I encourage the Chinese government in Beijing to call Iran about that because they depend on the Straits of Hormuz for their oil. If they do that, it'll be another terrible mistake. It's economic suicide for them if they do it. And we retain options to deal with that, but other countries should be looking at it as well. What happened next was remarkable. Within 24 hours of Rubio's public challenge, China issued a warning to Iran. The Persian Gulf and the surrounding waters are critical trade routes and must remain stable and open, Beijing declared, demonstrating that when pushed to choose between ideological alliance and economic self-interest, China predictably chose the later.
And we now have evidence that there are 100,000 Iranians now in the U.S. who are really a sleeper cell threat.
Oh, my God, this is unbelievable. Legally or illegally in the U.S., as to temporary visitors in the fiscal year of 23 alone, the State Department issued 17,500 non-immigrant visas to Iran, to Iranian nationals. In 23 and 24 year, 12,000 Iranian students were attending American institutions of higher education.
Why are we letting these people in?
Because Biden thinks those are votes. Give people free stuff, then they'll vote for you. That's ridiculous. The Citizenship and Migration Services approved petitions for 857 Iranians for initial employment as H-1B aliens in high-tech and other special occupancy. We need to bolster our protection against Iranian terror cells in the U.S., so-called sleeper cells, in light of Tehran's exhortation for them to rise up and attack the U.S. Already, U.S. intelligence has said that Iran was behind both the assassination attempts against President Trump. This is just ridiculous.
Meanwhile, while the country is celebrating the end of the Iranian nuclear threat, AOC calls for Trump's impeachment.
Oh, really? She's a little crazy. You think she's crazy, like Patsy Cline says? So here's what crazy AOC said. The president's disastrous decision to bomb Iran without authorization is a grave violation of the Constitution and congressional war powers. Shut up. He has impulsively risked launching a war that may ensnare us for generations. It is absolutely and clearly grounds for impeachment. Trump replied, this is great, he's a pisser. She and her Democratic friends have just hit the lowest poll numbers in congressional history. So go ahead and try impeaching me again. Make my day. He's a pisser, this guy. You gotta love him. Yeah, make his day. She's a moron.
When we come back, Trump called on Israel to stop prosecuting and persecuting Netanyahu.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. Trump today called on Israel to drop the criminal charges against Netanyahu. They indicted Netanyahu 10 years ago on minor charges. And it's been a decade-long corruption
Would
trial.
they get him, like jaywalking or something?
Trump labeled it a witch hunt, and it's right. What Netanyahu did was to get positive press coverage for himself and do everything he could to support his activities.
Yeah.
And the Israeli Supreme Court, that's controlled by ultra-liberals, found that grounds for criminal indictment. And Netanyahu has been laboring under the indictment for a decade now. Billy Joel has some thoughts on that. Trump said that the indictment of Netanyahu on bribery and fraud charges was based on flimsy allegations involving a gift of cigars, a Bugs Bunny doll, and numerous other unfair items. Trump said bluntly, the United States of America saved Israel, and now it's going to save Bibi Netanyahu. The president's comments appeared to embolden Netanyahu's supporters and allies within the Israeli government, many of whom quickly renewed calls to end the legal saga that's hovered over the prime minister since his 2020 indictment. Prosecutors have been preoccupied with preparing the prime minister's cross-examination, while Netanyahu has orchestrated a historic military campaign against Iran to save Israel. This trial has been a distraction, echoing the belief that legal proceedings now constitute a national strategic liability. National Security Minister Ben Gvir went even further, describing the entire process as an absurd trial fabricated by the deep state in an attempt to carry out a coup against democracy. Speaking on X, he applauded Trump's intervention as absolutely right and called for the trial to be scrapped altogether.
Good.
The judges of the Israeli Supreme Court are not appointed by Parliament. They're not appointed by the Prime Minister. They're chosen by the previous judges of the court. So
Really?
the court perpetuates itself as a Marxist left-wing oligarchy, and it injects itself into politics in a terrible way, and coming at a time when Netanyahu is sustaining Israel in the face of mortal threats. They wanted to cross-examine him for accepting a gift of cigars and a Bugs Bunny doll.
I find that to be
unbelievable.
Very funny. The Bugs Bunny doll.
Meanwhile, back here in the U.S., inflation has now dropped to 2%, which was the expectation level of the Federal Reserve Board. It appears to be on a sustained path toward 2%, and that will likely be only minimal impacts in the overall core rate of inflation due to changes in trade policy. So another boogeyman is gone.
Right.
The Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, the Fed's preferred gauge of inflation, after it hit 2.6% in February, it's declined over the next 2 months and hit 2.1% in April. Meanwhile, wages and salaries rose 0.4% in May, extending a run of solid monthly gains and continuing to outpace inflation, with core consumer prices rising by 0.2%. The latest wage increase of 0.4% represents a real gain in purchasing power for American workers. The increase marked the second consecutive months of 0.4% wage growth, driven by steady hiring and rising pay in both goods producing and services industry. Private sector payrolls led the way, with service-producing industries adding $40 billion in wages and goods-producing $7 billion in wages. So the fears of the left, the accusations of the economists that Trump's trade policies would cause a massive inflation has now not happened.
So inflation comes down, wages go up. Does that actually work in itself like a double? Like if it comes down 2% and wages go up 2%, is that 4%, or does it work that way?
It's 4%, but it takes some work to do each of them.
Wow. That's great. I think we should jump over this Supreme Court thing, mine, and go to your 33.
Okay.
One.
Trump set a record in the administration for energy production and pushed the U.S. to the fastest rate of new oil and gas drilling permits in years, running 44% of the Biden administration's at the same point in his term. This is Trump keeping his drill, baby, drill promise. As of June 18th, the Interior Department had approved 3,000 permits on federal lands, compared with 2,000 by Biden. This works out to roughly 600 permits monthly, a pace that hasn't been reached in 2 decades, as the department worked to fulfill Trump's mandate to drill, baby, drill. And Trump announced in the Gulf of America, that's the old Gulf of Mexico,
I love it,
an oil and gas lease sale would span 80 million acres, an area larger than the United Kingdom. The behemoth lease sale, which will be the first offshore lease sale since Trump took office, is coming up in December and will offer 15,000 blocks of federal waters across the Gulf open for drilling. The companies with winning bids will be subject to a reduced royalty rate, something that could potentially drive greater industry interest and participation in the sale. So he's keeping his promise of drill, baby, drill.
Drill, baby, drill.
And dramatically expanding our offshore oil production. The United States now gets very little oil from offshore because of federal regulation. But Trump has now expanded oil drilling dramatically, both in Alaska and offshore.
So we're going to be energy independent once again.
Energy
very soon.
dominant.
Right,
Yeah.
and dominant, right.
And China's trying to stop it by litigation and funding climate groups that Ted Cruz exposed.
Now let's talk about corruption. Nancy Pelosi, raked in between $7.8 million and $42 million in 2024, bringing her net worth with venture capitalist husband Paul Pelosi to an estimated $413 million. Wow, that's unbelievable. A large chunk of the couple's fortune has come from sizable stock portfolio and timely trades. Very timely, right? All done in Paul Pelosi's name. The couple, excuse me, the couple dumped 5,000 shares of Microsoft stock worth an estimate of $2.2 million in July. One of their largest sales in 3 years, just a few short months before the Federal Trade Commission announced an antitrust investigation into the tech giant. Imagine that. They just happen to know, let's get rid of this now before that happens, right? They also sold 2,000 shares worth an estimated of 525,000 of Visa stock less than 3 months before the credit card company was hit with a monopoly lawsuit by the Department of Justice.
Now, at the same time, Pelosi killed legislation in Congress to stop members of Congress from insider trading.
She killed it.
Killed it.
So she could do it.
So she could do it.
And not go to jail.
And this is why Pelosi held on to power for so long, because she was making a lot of money off it.
That's it. Their best trade might have been exercising a call option in December, allowing them to gain 50,000 shares of chipmaker NVIDIA stock for $12 a pop, less than 1/10 of its market price, the Post reported. In a total, the couple paid an estimated $2.4 million for the investment, which on paper is now worth $7.2 million. Unbelievable. You think she could go to jail?
Well,
that would
Donald
be nice.
Trump's victory last year was fueled by gains among Hispanic, Asian, Black, and young voters, eroding key pillars of the Democratic Party's coalition, according to an in-depth study of the election released this week. The survey found that Trump won white voters by 55 to 43, about what he did against Biden and against Hillary.
Right.
But nearly half of Hispanic voters, 48%, up from 36% in 20 and up from 28% in 16, voted for Trump. So basically Hispanics and Asians and black men elected Trump. His share of the white vote was the same as it was in 2016 and 2020. But his share among the black men vote, Asian voters, and Hispanic voters increased dramatically.
You know what,
the
Dick?
support among Asian voters grew from 30% to 40%, and among black voters from 8 to 15%, including an increase of 12% to 21% among black men. While Trump long appealed strongly to white voters without college degrees, his support among black and Hispanic voters increased among college graduates, as well as those with some college or less education.
You know what it is? They're not buying into the Democrats. We're going to give you stuff. We help you. They're not buying into that anymore. That's what it really is. Almost like what you said before. You got to not talk about yourself. You got to talk about the, Mandami. They're not buying into this stuff anymore, the Hispanics.
Yeah.
They just don't believe it.
It's amazing when you look at the fact that everybody wondered if Trump won because of a white backlash. Well, in fact, it was black and Hispanic and Asian voters who gave Trump this victory.
The Dems, everything's backfiring. Everything they've done
Unbelievable.
It was an honor to be here with you, Dick
this
Morris.
Was fun. Did somebody say goodbye to us?
Oh, she's going to say goodbye, doesn't she?
Thanks for listening to The Dick Morris Show. You can hear The Dick Morris Show Sundays at noon. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
77 WABC invites you to a family fun day and softball showdown on July 20th with net proceeds benefiting Shriners Children's. John Sterling will call the game as the FDNY takes on the NYPD with special guests Dwight Gooden, Art Shamsky, 77 WABC hosts including Sid Rosenberg, Anthony Cumia, Lionel, Dominic Carter, and many more. For more info and to buy tickets, go to ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. That's ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org.